Imagine just for a second your novel taking over your reader's life. They read it again and again, and with every return, they notice something new. Details they missed and meanings they never saw before. Seems like a far-fetched dream, something only stories like Harry Potter's and Game of Thrones can achieve. But what if I told you that making your novel this immersive, so gripping that readers keep coming back, isn't just about a great protagonist? After all, Harry Potter was yet another orphan protagonist with a special destiny. And think about it, not every reader saw themselves in Gryffindor either. Yet, they still found themselves deep in another readathon year after year. And what if I told you that your novel doesn't need elaborate world building like Hogwarts or Westeros either? So if it is not just the protagonist and it is not just about world building, then what is it? What makes those stories feel so immersive? It's how every piece of your story connects through subplots. This is what separates books that get read once from the ones that take over a reader's life. And best-selling authors aren't guessing when they craft subplots. They use a hidden framework, one that uses subplots to anchor the story into their reader's memory. A framework so powerful it pulls readers in and leaves them craving more. Once you master this, writing won't feel the same again. You won't just write stories. You'll create narratives so rich readers need to return to them again and again. Let me show you how it works and how you can use it too in your own novel. Now you might be wondering, who am I to talk to you about subplots? Well, I started as a storytelling coach back in 2018, helping entrepreneurs craft the stories behind their brands and behind their online courses. But being a lifelong bookworm, I soon realized that my true calling was helping aspiring authors like you bring their novels to life. I'm also the founder of Authorpreneurs Club, an online coaching program where I teach writers how to master storytelling, self-publishing, and entrepreneurship, turning their craft into a thriving business. I'll be transparent with you, I don't have anything to sell you as this program is not available in English anyway. And I'm not just teaching this stuff, I'm writing my own novel too, so I understand the ups and downs of crafting a story that feels both meaningful and complete. So the question is, are you ready to finally master the dark art of subplots and unlock the full potential of your story? Before we dive into the intricacies of subplot creation, let's start with the basics. And trust me, even with the basics, you might discover a few things that you hadn't considered before. So what are subplots? They enrich your story by adding depth, advancing the main plots and contrasting its theme, and revealing more about your characters and their internal conflict, making them more engaging and integral to the narrative. But here's a differentiation that will change the way you see subplots. They are positive and negative subplots. And understanding the difference between the two is crucial. Before we dive into the differences between a positive subplots and a negative subplots, here's a quick favor. If you're enjoying this series so far, hit the like button to let the algorithm know that you would like more storytelling content on your feed, but also because it would really help the channel, so I would truly appreciate it. And subscribe if you haven't already. Alright, so positive subplots, they focus on resolving the internal conflicts of the characters involved, supporting growth and development. Negative subplots, on the other hand, they are there to introduce challenges and complication or mislead the protagonist, creating tension and obstacles. Let's start with an example from Game of Thrones. A positive subplot is Jon Snow's journey with the Night's Watch. His time there helps him find purpose and identity, ultimately strengthening his moral compass. A negative subplot, in contrast, is Tyrion's alliance with Daenerys. While well-intentioned, it does complicate his loyalty to his family and leads to mistrust and betrayals. Now, let's look at Desperate Housewives. Gabrielle's struggle to embrace motherhood is a positive subplot. It challenges her internal conflict, her belief that she's incapable of being a good mother due to her past trauma, and helps her grow. Meanwhile, her backstory with Alejandro, her abusive stepfather, serves as a negative subplot, introducing moral dilemmas and conflicts that ripple through the entire series. And here's the thing, whether you're writing an epic fantasy or a standalone mystery, subplots can transform your story. They may not take as much space in standalone novels as they do in series, but their purpose remains the same, to add richness, complexity, and layers to your narrative. Okay, so now that we've covered the basics, how do we develop subplot ideas so that they earn their place in your story? We do that with 3 simple steps. Step 1, define the why. Every subplot must serve a purpose. Ask yourself, why does this subplot matter? Does it explore a theme, build tension, or deepen a character's arc? For example, Daenerys' why in Game of Thrones is her desire to free others from tyranny, which ties directly to her internal conflict between compassion and ambition. Similarly, Gabrielle's subplots about her love life in Desperate Housewives are rooted in her internal conflict. Her belief that she's incapable of unconditional love and motherhood due to her abusive past. Step 2, define the destination. Ask yourself, what would be the most surprising yet satisfying resolution of your subplot? Where does it lead? And how does it tie into the main narrative? In Game of Thrones, Daenerys' fall from power aligns with the show's themes of moral compromise. In Desperate Housewives, Gabrielle's resolution culminates in her covering up the murder of Alejandro to protect her friends and family, confronting her past and finding a sense of self-worth. Okay, so you've defined the why and the destination of your subplot. Now let's figure out how to get there. To bring your subplots to life, you need a roadmap. And this is where my storytelling pillars framework comes in. Quick TLDR, if you haven't watched the rest of my storytelling series, the 6 storytelling pillars are the inciting incident, the progressive complications, the turning point, the moment of crisis and contemplation, the climax, and the resolution. Each pillar serves a unique role in crafting a complete and engaging story. For an in-depth breakdown, be sure to check out part 1 and part 2 of this series. These storytelling pillars have 6 levels of applications. The dual storyline, the parts of your story, the sequences, the scenes, the dialogues, and finally the subplots. Make sure to watch part 2 for more details on that. Right, so to create the roadmap for your subplot, you'll need to define these 6 storytelling pillars on 2 levels: the global story of your subplot and the parts of your subplot. If you prefer simplicity, you can stick to the traditional 3-part structure, beginning, middle, and end, but I recommend breaking it down into 4 parts: the trigger, the trailer moments, the journey to hell, and the grand finale. Again, I made a whole video on that, so make sure to check part 2 of this series. Now, you might be thinking, Jules, even with 3 parts, if I apply 6 storytelling pillars to each, that's still 18 steps for a subplot. Isn't that overkill? Here's the thing, when it comes down to subplots, not every pillar needs to appear on the page, but you do need to have clarity on all 18 or 24 pillars to ensure your story doesn't have subplot holes. It is this groundwork that makes your story feel real and immersive. If you want your story to feel as real to your readers as it feels to you, you owe it that level of groundwork. So if not all pillars needs to be on the page, how do you then decide which pillars should appear and which ones shouldn't? Well, let me tell you about the dimension of the framework that I haven't revealed yet: the anchor pillars. Not every subplot moment needs to appear on the page, but the ones that do must anchor seamlessly to the main narrative. The anchor pillars are the specific storytelling pillars of your subplot's parts that directly tie into the main plots and are shown on the page. For example, Daenerys' subplot climax of her grand finale part in Game of Thrones, when she destroys King's Landing, is an anchor pillar because we get to experience it. In Desperate Housewives, Gabrielle's decision to cover up Alejandro's murder is an anchor pillar as well. It ties her subplots to the season's central mystery. Meanwhile, other moments like her internal reflections on her past trauma might be hinted at through dialogue or actions rather than explicitly shown, ensuring that the pacing remains tight. By identifying the anchor pillars, you can streamline your subplots while ensuring they serve the main story. Ultimately, the decision of which pillars should be off-page and which ones should be anchor pillars comes down to you. It is your story, and you need to find that balance that will be unique to your story, your style, and your voice. For instance, J.K. Rowling often limits the number of anchor pillars when it comes to Dumbledore's subplots in Harry Potter's. Many of his romantic subplot elements are hinted at or revealed indirectly, inviting readers to fill in the gaps themselves. Okay, so now you know the differences between a positive and a negative subplot. You know how to make sure they earn their place in your story, and you understand how to structure them both on and off the page to make your story feel real and immersive. Now, how do you make sure that all of your work doesn't get lost in the midst of it all? That's where the crucial art of tracking comes in. Now, if you've made it this far, I want to let you in on something. Since this channel has been growing quite a bit with this storytelling series, I've realized how much this approach is resonating and, more importantly, how many of you wants to apply it to your novels. So I've been thinking about creating a private community where I can help you do exactly that, apply these frameworks to your story. Most likely it will be a very small focus group because, let's be real, there is no way that I can give personalized feedback to 100 people. If that's something that you'd be interested in, then join the newsletter. I'll be sharing all the updates there first. And let me know in the comments as well if you'd be up for it. I've pinned a comment about it, so feel free to reply there. Timing is key when introducing subplots. Therefore, tracking them is crucial to maintaining their relevance and cohesion. Why track subplots? To evaluate the timing. Ask yourself, where do they start in relation to the main plot? Is the main plot well established in the story to start anchoring this subplot? Why? Because you want to avoid overwhelming your readers too early on. And there are two ways to track your subplots. And personally, I do the first one when I brainstorm, and then I crystallize everything with the second one. But feel free to do one or the other if that works better for you. So the first way is to draw the timeline either on a physical or digital whiteboard like Canva. First, draw a line in the middle to represent your main plot. You then place the storytelling pillars for each part of your story on that line. Ideally, add a few notes on what's going on for that specific pillar, just for your own reference and to keep things clear. Now, take a different color and place the storytelling pillars for each part of your subplot under the main plot line. Once you've decided which ones will be anchor pillars, move them up to anchor them to the main plot line. This way, you'll have a full visual representation of your subplot and you'll know exactly what will be on the page and what you will have to imply in your story. Then repeat the process of anchoring the pillars for all your subplots, weaving them gradually into the main plot line as your story progresses. You can either have all of your subplots on the same graph or create separate ones if it gets too messy for you. The second way is to create a timeline on a good old Excel or Google Sheet. Even a database on Notion works great. You can do it vertically or horizontally. I prefer vertically, but to each their own. So start by adding the storytelling pillars for each part of your main plot. Then add adjacent rows or columns for each subplot, noting how they progress alongside the main narrative. If you want to include all the pillars of your subplots in that grid, you can use color coding to differentiate between anchor pillars, so the ones that will be visible to your readers, and standard pillars, so the ones that will be implied. For example, let's take Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. As you can see here, I've mapped the vertical timeline of the story, tracking the anchor pillars of the subplot about the prophecy and the romantic subplots involving Harry, Ginny, and Joe. This method allows you to see how subplots intersect with the main plot while ensuring each anchor pillar earns its place on the page. By doing this, you'll avoid subplot holes and maintain a cohesive story. Just remember, subplots aren't just extra layers in your story. They are the connection between your characters. The invisible threads that make your cast feel like they belong in a world so lived in, it feels almost more real than reality. And if your subplots ever feel disconnected, the real problem might not be the subplots. It might be the way you're thinking about character roles. That's why in the next video, I'm introducing a whole new framework that will change the way you approach character development. And once you see how it works, you'll never look at your cast the same way again. You can watch it by clicking here, unless it's not live yet, in which case make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it when it drops. I hope you find this video helpful. I'm Julian Maylet. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.